welcome on Watches TV, welcome at our club space, and today we have the honor having the friends visit here with Mr. Ali Nael. And it's been a while that we haven't done one of those segments, me, myself and my watches, but today we have a really nice one to share with you. So Ali, you're a collector. Obviously, being a collector meaning that sometimes you trade in a few watches because that's the way it works. But before that, you have a very interesting life journey, and I think it's a very inspiring one. And please share with us a little bit what you've gone through until today, basically.
Thanks for having me first. You've been a great friend over the years, and I would like to personally thank you on behalf of all the watch community for all the things that you're doing for us, for the awareness and for the effort that you're putting into this, so thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm Lebanese born, I always been raised in Lebanon. I was raised in Lebanon, but I left Lebanon at age 21, straight to China. Unfortunately, it was the year that my father passed away. So I wanted to explore something new and to have maybe a different future. So I left with a full luggage and nothing, no money, just a dream, to Macau because I had a friend there. That's I come for a vacation, you must be very bad situation. So I said, yes, I'm coming. And I decided to stay. So I built everything from nothing. I started to export goods from China. So I opened an office in Guangzhou, a tough city, one of the toughest cities. And I started my journey in the export market. It was good because Lebanese community is everywhere in the world. So I was able to connect with some people in West Africa where they had successful businesses there. And I started to ship goods from China, based on trust. That was the key, I think, for the market at the time, of the Chinese market. So I started like that, hustle, working 16 hours a day until today, 24/7. And 2006, a few years later, I started in 2003 in China. 2006, I bumped into an oil trader that told me you should consider, doing this business in China market. And soon enough, actually, I learned quite fast. I really fell in love with that business. And from one person to another connection, I started to build, the network for it. Then I built a very successful oil company. I started it in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur. And 2009, I moved to Singapore, where I set up an office there. And fast forward 2014, I had 8 offices around the globe. But this is purely, with a dream and a goal and the hustle. So what brought me into watches, maybe later on we talk about. But just to say that I really hardworking and I love what I do.
Okay, yeah. And so when did this attraction to watches start?
Sam Hines, thank you. He's now the head of Sotheby's. He came to Singapore in 2009, and I was a friend with the head of Christie's at the time in Singapore. So she said, come and meet this guy. He's very interesting. You should consider watches. I said, okay, I'm coming. So I had a coffee with him, and the coffee became 2 hours later a dinner, became drinking. We became good friends, and he convinced me, to start buying watches in auction. And I think 3 months later was the first auction in New York, Christie's, and I bought 12 watches there, Immediately.
But before that, did you have any kind of interest for mechanical watch?
Of course, just reading, at that time books, of course the internet was not as wide as it is today, so I was just reading a little bit more about the aesthetics, a bit about the movement history, but I fell in love with Pateks, so from the day one, I was in a classic environment, with the corporate environment, so I always liked classic watches. But also from childhood, I'm always been a collector, stamps, collector, coins, currency, paper currency. I was really obsessed at a young age of collecting, valuable historical things. And I used to go a big length to source these things, by walking the whole city in a day, to try with the currency exchange, shops, to beg them to give me some rare currencies, So I always had the passion to collect. And back in 2009, when I started to make some reasonable money, I didn't want to waste it. I was single, I didn't want to waste it on party, and so I wanted to push myself to buy something, that I think, can preserve the value, over time. So I started collecting watches for this reason. Actually, to stop myself as a young guy, also to do terrible things.
So what were those 12 initial watches then?
As I think every collector start in the auction by buying the value or what they think is a bargain. I was bargain hunting in 2009, so I bought. You remember a brand called Vincent Bérard?
Yeah?
Yeah, it's amazing pieces, amazing.
Okay.
So I think the first two I bought in the auction were Vincent Bérard,
Okay.
independent. That doesn't exist today, but I think it's one of the most beautiful pieces ever made.
Quite a while I didn't catch this name.
He used to make movements with 10 days power reserve, unheard of at the time, and it's beautiful work. And I bought some Ulysse Nardin, maybe, GLC. Anything that I saw is attractive and I thought is a good bargain.
Okay.
That's how I started. To my surprise, of course, when the watches arrived, they were really beautiful and I was very happy with them. I think I still have like 2 or 3 of these watches, just from sentimental value.
Of course, I understand. Yeah.
Sentimental value.
All right, and how did the journey move on then?
I started be interested more into the auctions. So I started to go first of all to Hong Kong, by Sam, you have to come and see the watches yourself. So I started to go into auctions, buying modern pieces and independents only. So I'm proud to say I'm one of the early also people that bought FP Journe, that bought Kari Voutilainen. I'm based in Singapore, so the independents, they always came to Singapore.
Sure.
To launch their brand or to launch a new creation. So of course I had the chance to meet the watchmakers. I felt happy, to meet the creator himself, and I started to commission pieces at the time. So basically modern pieces, mainly Pateks. Sealed watches, you remember these days, buy them and put them in the safe. I passed through all what I call the journey that any collector, passed through to reach to the vintage, or to be confident enough to start buying vintage. I think that's the key, yeah.
But at the time, you were buying more for yourself,
Yes.
And you weren't necessarily thinking of trading them?
Never. Actually, over many, many years, I think from 2009 until 2017, everyone in the community or everyone that knew me, he knew that I never sell a watch. So I was only a buyer and I was never a seller, because I really love the pieces. I don't buy them for their value only, I buy them because I love them. I think until 2017, 18, I never thought to sell a watch until I started to consider, how to leave the intensity of the commodity business, and the stress that I had was intense. And to start to spend time with my kids. How can I create that balance? Of course, you follow your dream, you follow your passion. And I honestly already was at that time spending more time on watches than I'm spending on my own business, So it was already happening, for me. This is the time where I established 2018, established Two-Tone Vintage.
Okay.
But I was still in the oil business at the time. It took me a year after that to quit completely.
When did you feel that your level of expertise reached a high enough understanding, and that you felt confident enough to do things really?
2014. 2014 was not a private treaty, not through collectors or through someone I respect, that I bought the first time I participate aggressively in a vintage auction, So I remember that very, very clearly in Hong Kong, Christie's Hong Kong. I bought the first batch of vintage watches, even though I already had vintage watches from private treaties, but it was the first time I buy at auction. Again, it's because of the trust you have with the person in the auction. That's how it starts, that you get a good advice, and then, you have few people that you respect, you check with them, second opinion. But at that time also I spent a few years to read, about movement making, dial making, case making. So I was trying to, educate myself a little bit more about that. But I think the most important journey in vintage watches is experience. You have to do it again and again and again. Blame yourself when you make mistakes is very important, because you learn a lot from it. I think 2014 was the start of that journey, is also because of the reason of having the right people around me to guide me and try to avoid mistakes.
So yeah, I was about to ask you this. Indeed, I guess because you have other collector colleagues and you learn a lot from them because there's a lot of exchange between you guys. Until that point, what were kind of the pieces that you acquired that really kind of made you go?
I think we were speaking just earlier, a few minutes ago, about a person that we both respect a lot, Mr. Hagman.
Yes.
Mr. JPH, like we call him.
Our neighbor,
Yeah.
like 50 meters down the road.
I think, the first series piece I bought was a 3974 made by Hagman, a minute repeater that I think is a very important historical piece, let's say, that was, I think, not turning back, after that. I think that was a very important piece that I wanted to acquire. But just prior to this, I acquired, a 2526 Patek with the black dial, and maybe a reference 96, 570, the obvious, that I think every collector should start with the, maybe an automatic Patek or a 570, a historical watch, or a 96. So I started with the obvious, and when I got the first time I got the watches, I delivered the watches, look at them, maybe not the top quality, that I was hoping. So I started to say, okay, I made a decision in 2014 to say quality only. So I will only buy the perfect condition. So that's what put me in a serious position to say, okay, only the best, only the best.
All right. And you mentioned that you were buying also independents that were obviously a bit more fresher on the watchmaking scene. What is kind of the balance between the vintage part and these new independents?
I think at that time, every 10 modern piece, I had 2 independents. If I may say it this way. I think at one point I had the 2020 June, the early ones. I also owned 2 of the subscriptions.
Nice.
Some of them sold for millions in the auctions, not me, by the ones that bought it for me for peanuts. But it's very good to see these watches become very important. Unfortunately, I did sell the independent watches that I had because I really became a fanatic on the vintage Pateks. So when I suddenly get an offer for a certain piece and I don't have enough cash to pay for it, or maybe I already spent the money a week before, for the watches, I would actually sell independent or I sell a modern Patek. So over time, I actually don't have any of these pieces. But I never sold the vintage Patek at the time, so it was only a transition, of a collector. I always say collecting is a journey. For me, it's very simple. I start with modern, the obvious, with the show-off, pieces in 2009. And I move slowly into more collectible references, and then independents, and then I move into vintage and not turning back.
And regarding vintage, do you limit yourself to wristwatches, or you also have an interest for pocket watches?
I'm crazy about pocket watches. I'm crazy. I think in the last 6 years, I focused a lot on pocket watches. For many reasons. Actually, it's very difficult to find a vintage. Now it's becoming very, very difficult to find a good condition vintage watch. So it started to be frustrating to me around 2015-16. I say, these pocket watches are, very important. I want to look at them. I want to start educating myself with that. Again, I had the right people, 6-7 years ago to tell me, hey, look at this movement. This is historical. This is important. And I started to build that collection. So I think today I have a balance between pocket watches and wrist watches in my own collection. One-to-one, basically. Yeah.
And I mean, the word collection is really appropriate because I know what you have, and it's just I don't know everything that you have, but you have a wide collection. Walk us through a little bit what you have and what it means for you, what these models means for you.
I think a little bit about the journey. Is I'm not a very particular person on certain reference or certain movement or certain complication. I think I respect every watch equally, for its condition. So I always tell my friends, and now clients, because of course, I have a business, but I always tell them quality first, top quality, rarity comes second, it's very important. If you can find quality and rarity, you have a jackpot, today. But I always bought systematically, meaning that even a watch that didn't really much attract me, a Patek didn't attract me from the aesthetics. When I get it in my hand, my heart would drop. So it was very difficult for me to say no. No. But I think the market also helped me, a lot in collecting such a large number of Pateks, for example. Because I'm not a follower of hype, or market. I don't follow market trend. I always been a contrarian from a very young age. Not a rebellion, but a contrarian. So I think you remember back in 2013-14, the Daytona craze. That was the first hype that I witnessed as a collector. Of course, today we have a different kind of hype. That was very good for me because I didn't like these watches at the time. I wasn't very active lifestyle, so I didn't want to have sports watches. They didn't attract me at all. So I actually thank the auction houses and whoever made the hype at the time, to thank them because they allowed me to collect Pateks.
Yeah, it kind of defocused a little bit the market and
correct. Because usually, they go with what the customer wants. At that time, the customer wanted Daytona, Paul Newman, or sports Rolexes, Submariners, whatever is the references or the importance of it. I had so much respect for these watches, but I didn't understand the value. But I definitely understood the value of the Pateks because that's my passion. So I consider myself very lucky and thankful for all at that time. I didn't have much competition on the Pateks, especially the Calatravas also, So I was able to, spread the word around privates, dealers, auction houses, that any Calatrava, any Patek I'm interested in. And that helped me actually to buy these watches. And, because today if I want to buy these watches, it's just simply impossible. I think I also learned that, some of the top collectors' names that we know, the immense big collections, much larger collections, they were in a different era as well. But I think it's never too late. It's never too late. And I'm with, how to say, an example because, 2013-14, starting collecting and having such a collection is possible in our era. Even today, we should not be afraid, of that. Yeah.
And I mean, you say that you focused mainly, obviously, on Patek, like you said, but are there other brands that draw a little interest on you,
yes.
And why?
I collected and still collect early Rolexes, early Rolex chronographs. I always had the respect for the pre-Daytonas. The early, the early 3525s, the early single button chronographs. Of course, the Padelloni, the 8171. I really had always loved the early Rolexes, pre-Oyster cases, if I may say. I have Vacheron, I have a lot of respect for Vacheron watches because I consider them the same value, the same quality as Patek at the end. At that time, the quality of the movements, the cases, and the dials were exactly the same.
Yeah, often made by the same people.
Correct, and I find it it's the same people doing the same thing. So of course, if I find an important Vacheron, I will keep it. Also APs. I think you fall in love with some pieces. Maybe you buy them and you don't know what to do, but when you receive the watch, I'm keeping this. It has to speak to you. So you end up with different brands in the collection. But I can say very clearly it's Rolex, Vacheron, and Patek. So that's the focus.
So 2017-18, when you started the business side of your activity, tell us a little bit what drew you towards that.
Tough question. Well, if you allow me, I will say it as it is. Actually, it was from my travel to the auctions over time. I saw an issue. I saw an issue of collectors like me, just starting at the time to collect vintage. It's difficult, to assess the quality, the condition. You have to really rely on yourself a lot and your own knowledge a lot, which was, to me, it was a big problem, for the market. A lot of people were afraid to dive into the vintage market because they don't have enough information or enough details. So I think back when I started to come to Geneva for the auctions, I started to, see a gap in the market. And maybe 5-6 years before, I decided, hey, I might do it one day. I want to do it. I want to do it better, slower but better. I think back in 2017-18 also, I was start to be really unhappy in my company because it's growing. It grew a lot. And it became like a corporate. The family environment was not there anymore. We had too many processes, too many procedures, too many risk management, too many, talking to the banks every day. And, I wasn't enjoying my work. So I go back to what I decided many years ago to say that I think I'm gonna open a watch business, and I'm gonna do it my way, the collector way. And when I had the chance to do that, I did it. Basically, when I had the chance to sell my company to my partners, and I did exactly that. Yeah. So now I have time to spend with my family at least. My family was very, very unhappy at the time.
Yeah.
They never see me. So I was always on the airplane working 16 hours a day, and also even you're physically there, you're not mentally there. So family was actually my biggest motivation, and the second biggest percentage is really I wanted to do it better.
Okay. And so what differentiates you, would you say, today in your way of taking care of the business?
No one can do their better than the other. No one can say that. I think it's a very bad thing to say. But I think people close to me or the loyal clients or good friends, they know that I still do it the same way I do it as a collector. Meaning that I buy the watch as if I'm buying it for myself. So that's the first rule. It will always be the same rule. I'm willing to keep the piece forever, because I like the piece and I bought it for a reason. And declaration of what you know. Declaring what you know about the watch was something that it was a dream of mine, is to tell the people, okay, I think the dial has been cleaned, I think the case has been polished a couple of times, I like to sell the watches as they are, and declare what I know, and value them based on what I know. I think it's very important not to sell a watch at the price of an A-grade watch, when it is a B quality. That was a very important rule for me because I faced it a lot as a collector, that someone tried to price a piece, they think, maybe they don't want to know, but they think is it top quality, but it's not, so, or even they know it's not top quality, but they're trying to sell it for a very high price. I had a problem with that, because you don't want to pay for something too expensive and then go to the auction season or auction market and then you say, oh, this is not good quality. So, all this experience as a collector, I just wanted to make it a better journey for other people, so using what you know and then declare it and be clear about it and price the pieces based on their quality. I think these rules will always be, the DNA of the company. Yeah.
So you've been talking quite a lot about how you were sourcing your watches through auctions, either for yourself or maybe for your business also. But there are probably other ways of doing it. Can you be a bit transparent about that for the audience?
Yeah, of course. I think spread the word. I spread the word at that time. Everyone in the market, of course, in a small circle, knew that Ali is buying the Pateks. So if you want to sell this piece, call Ali. I think that helped me a lot because the competition was not very strong, as I said earlier. I think slowly this is what happened. So people start to contact me, from different parts of the world, be it from Europe or even Latin America. I think I sourced a lot of important pieces from Latin America. US, some Latin watches, of course, end up in the US, Japan, anywhere in the world. I think sourcing is endless as long as people know what you're looking for. I think some examples of some, strong people on Instagram, every day they post, I'm looking for this, I'm looking for that. They know the power of communication, I think. But also the circle, slowly you have allies, meaning you have even dealers or privates, they're looking for things for you in different cities, be it in Turkey or, like even Latin America, I bought from crazy places that I will never visit in my life. There's a lot of risks about these kind of things because you might pay for the watch and you never see it.
Did you have bad experiences?
One only, that I paid, I never received the watch, unfortunately. But I bought 2-3 watches before that from the same guy, so so it happens. Actually, the watch was stolen in Guatemala. just stolen by the courier, you know, as simple as that. I never saw the money, I never saw the watch again. So, but it was an important reference to 2510, you know, it's a very large Calatrava, there are only 5 known, so I was very happy to find number 6, you know. Unfortunately, I never see the watch again. It did pop again in Miami later, and I know who had it in Miami, but I didn't want to make a story, you know, just let it go.
Move on.
Yeah, move on.
All right.
Yeah.
I mean, the vintage scene has exploded over the last few years, indeed. So the sourcing of the watches is becoming more and more complicated. But do you still find nice surprises, or everything? What percentage would you say is referenced today compared to everything that has been produced?
I think it's very difficult to find a good vintage watch at the moment, even for me. For auctions as well, as you see, we saw in the auction season, we were just talking about it. Actually, there's not much vintage watches in the auctions. I think many reasons why the vintage watches disappeared. If you see how, the percentage of newcomers and new collectors that came to the market in the last 2 years is, I don't know, in the hundreds of thousands. You take maybe even 5% of these people that actually said, hey, maybe we are different, you know, let's go for vintage. Even if you take these 5%, they're enough to dry out the whole production of the vintage watches. So I think there's still watches out there. Prices will be more and more attractive for collectors to let go, you know, of some pieces. So we might see in the future some collections coming back, maybe some estate sales, some new discoveries. It's not that there's no watches in the market, but it became very easy for people to sell them. So the timing, you have to make a decision extremely quick. You know, you get an offer, you have to buy it in 5 minutes. You know, so it became very fast. Social media is contributing, but also collectors are keeping these watches. You know, so there's a phenomenon in the vintage market now. No one wants to sell. You know, and it's very easy to sell because of, you know, the Instagram, and you know, so you don't have the chance to see these watches. I think we need more estate sales. You know, I think that's the key to discover new watches, or maybe for the vintage watches to become also more valuable over time for collectors to decide, hey, you know, let's cash out on these pieces. It's getting very difficult, honestly. It's getting very difficult.
And last year you published a book.
Correct.
That is portraying your collection at that moment, at least. What did it mean to you to do this?
I just had an idea in the back of my head, not a firm one actually, not a firm one. But you know, I was getting a little bit irritated of no one knowing that I have these watches, you know, and sitting in a safe. I don't see them every day, you know. So when the COVID hit, Singapore decided in February 2021, 2020, right? Or March, to lock down, you know. And me being me, I love to work. I just couldn't sit down. So I said, you know, you're locking down, no one is allowed in the office, everything, you know, we're only allowed to go and buy a supermarket and, you know, something like that. I said, I'm gonna, you know, run away from home, you know, go to the office and start this project. You know, so I called people, you know, that I trust around me, you know, from photographer, from, you know, book designers, you know, try to put a team in the middle of the pandemic. Actually, the pandemic was the only reason why I decided to write the book, is because I thought that I had the time to do it. I didn't realize it's such a hard, you know, it was horrible, you know. And, you know, we put a book 400 pages together. It's not easy. 128 vintage Pateks in the book, covering really a very wide range of references. And I wanted really to do it as a literature book, not as a picture book. So the information inside is so valuable. And I thought, why should I know these details and not share it, you know? So let's do it the traditional way and publish a book. First of all, to show the collection. Second of all, to share the literature. You know, for me, most important is not what's inside the book, is what's written in the book. You know, because this I always say, is a small investment. The book is not so cheap, you know, but actually it's very, very, very cheap. You know, actually I lose money on every book I sell because of the quality of the book. Most important for me is to share the information.
Yes, share the knowledge.
Yeah, and then now everyone can bid in the auction knowing the rarity. of the piece, knowing what's the difference between this movement and that movement, and look at the quality of the pieces. You know, I think it's appreciated by so many collectors. You know?
Yeah, because I mean, I don't think there are that many people that want to be as transparent as that and give those keys of understanding how things are working. You know?
Yeah, I wanted to share all this information in the book. You know, how many made, how many known, the movement details, how many made of the movements. It's actually a very detailed book. I don't think anyone's willing to do it. But also, you know, in the pandemic, you know, I spent three days a week, you know, just photo shooting and you know, so 3 days every week for many months only focusing on the book. So it took 1 year of work, 6 months, literally 6 months of hours, you know, to do the book, and a team around it. But by sharing this, I think sharing the information is a very good value for the market, you know, because whoever decides to have the book now is much more confident to buy a watch because he has a lot of information. Yeah.
So for me, this is the notion of sharing is absolutely key. Yeah, yeah. And another little question, because since you're here in Geneva, and I know that you go once in a while to the Patek Museum, tell us what is your impression of this place when you get into there and you see this amazing collection?
I tell you about the first time. I think that's the most meaningful. First time I went there, I think 2014. I literally cried that day, you know, because I was so emotional. I went there, I think they opened at 9 o'clock. I was on the door at 8:30, you know, so I was so excited to be there in the morning, and I wanted to be the one first because I didn't want anyone to push me, and, you know, so, and I saw a group of tourists waiting as well, you know, so I said, where are you starting? First floor. And I went on the fourth floor, I think, you know, and I started from, you know, no one with me, you know, like looking there, so, you know, having goosebumps, you know, so emotionally attracted to everything in the windows, taking pictures, which is not allowed, you know, they stopped me 3 times. Actually, I also thank the museum because they enforced my love for Pateks at the time, and, you know, the museum showed me the way or the path of what I want to do, you know, and at that time I decided, okay, only wristwatches first. You know, I don't have much knowledge on the pocket watches, but hopefully one day when I have the confidence, you know, it's all the museum that reinforced this. Even artistic pieces or enameled pieces, you know, I had zero confidence to buy, but it was the museum that actually enforced the idea that one day I will buy an art, you know, an enamel watch, or I will buy a pocket watch. You know, I will try to go more deep into the evolution of movements, you know, and creations. Like yesterday, I bought a detent, you know, escapement movement for the first time. I mean, how important is that movement? You know, it takes time for us to understand these things, and I'm extremely thankful for the museum. It's a path, it's a way, you know, for you to see your journey. Actually,
That was an inspiration for you.
It's a huge inspiration. And when I went back, I was like really, literally emotional. You know, having a coffee outside. You know, it's like emotional, very emotional. It's like, wow, this is what I want. You know.
Yeah, for those coming to Geneva, I mean, the visit of the Patek Museum is just a must.
Yeah,
it's just
go from the airport straight to the museum because it will make your trip.
That's true. But just for a little clearing up, I mean, it's open now only in the afternoon. It starts at 1 or 2 o'clock, I can't remember, and it's on 3 floors. But it's an absolutely fantastic place. It's just the quality of the pieces there are just, I mean, you're talking about quality. You only have quality.
Also, the quantity is unbelievable.
Yeah, you have quality and quantity. It's just quite something. So maybe one day you'll reach that point.
I don't think we can aim that high. You know, I don't think we can aim that high. But I do have an ambition to open like a small private museum, not to public because you know I cannot do it in town. And you know, I have to do it maybe in a bonded space. Actually, honestly, I took the space already. I'm decorating it already.
Because I mean, you have pieces that you would find their alter ego at that museum, right? You can be
actually, I'm already aware that the museum is somehow chasing me for some pieces that they are missing. It happens, you know, sometimes because you know the father was a very active buyer, but today the strategy is different, you know. But the museum sometimes do miss some watches. Or maybe they have the copy or the sister of the watch. They want to complete the set, you know. So we have a lot of mutual pieces that you know. I will never get anything from the museum,
of course.
But I think one day they might.
But to be at that level, I think it must be quite an achievement for you.
It is. You know, I'm every time I achieve something, I want something else. You know, do you know how human are? You know, so But I think yes, I'm a little bit tired of keeping the watches in the safe, to be honest. Especially all these pocket watches, historical pieces, and I would love to showcase them. First and foremost for me, because I honestly also will not go, to the safe regularly and then open these pieces, and so I want them to be at least see the light, and I can enjoy them more. I think that's key to motivate me to buy, to find new things, because now also I need to find the motivation, to acquire some pieces. Yeah.
But precisely talking about motivation, what are your kind of, well, not necessarily holy grails that you're chasing after, but I mean, what's your next thing that would really make you, just so happy?
I think pocket watches, objects. I started to fall in love with historical objects, like singing birds, like historical pieces from the 1800s. Not only falling in love, I actually can't sleep sometimes when I see something, because, still you imagine today you can find something that's the first, split made, the first detent escapement made. I mean, you can find a lot of historical pieces that today we cannot really find on the wrist. I mean, it's very difficult to acquire the wrist pieces. So at least I have a way to say that, hey, I still can buy, important pieces. But I think I'm really looking for art pieces today, that are missing, some objects, you might be aware I bought the amphora, for example, and I bought the second amphora, so two amphora, these kind of objects, a few of them, like the nécessaire, so I'm looking for nécessaires, for amphoras, for important movements, historical movements. I think that's the way to go for me at the moment. It brings me a lot of joy. And they finally start to come back to the market, because these pieces, auctions were not taking them a few years back because of limitations they have on 100 lots or 200 lots. But finally we see them again, coming to the auctions, and you can be very proud of owning such pieces. Very important pieces that are worth a fraction of a modern wrist piece made yesterday, they can bring $1 million or $2 million, but these pieces are so historically important they can sell for the same value. Yeah. So I think it's an opportunity.
Well, you mentioned joy, and I think this should be indeed the key driver.
It's always. Yeah. Motivation is about joy. If you're
joy,
not enjoying,
pleasure,
you need to. If you don't enjoy something, you don't have motivation. So I think we're all looking for that all the time. Yeah.
So I mean, thank you so much. I mean, we talked about much of your journey, and you had some very interesting insight to share with all of you guys. But we're still going to show you a couple of timepieces that you bought, because you couldn't bring everything from Singapore, obviously. But you did have a few nice things. You have a very nice thing on your wrist, of course. But tell us a little bit more about specifically these watches then.
Yeah, what I mean, I came with some watches to Geneva, of course, so I can share with you, two references of 130. This is an early steel case, reference 130 with the Patek Philippe & Co. So it's a very early example, early 40s example. So I'm very happy to have this piece, because of the quality. It's, to find a piece that is 70, 80 years old in this condition is really, really rare. Really.
If you had an issue with one of your timepiece in terms of taking care of it, restoring it maybe a little bit, or just servicing it, how do you do that?
I'm very fortunate to have own service center. So actually I have a service center with watchmakers there, and the master watchmaker that of course is the only one that I give my, so I'm lucky to have an experienced watchmaker to do it in-house. Usually I don't touch anything, only the movement, so if it's tough to wind, usually if it's working I don't even service the watch. But if I find it is too tough, or I think the oil is too dry, then maybe there will be friction in the movement.
Which could damage things.
So I really wait until that stage. I don't service the watches even regularly. I just service them when they need to be serviced. I don't restore watches at all on the dials or like this. I have only one time asked someone to help me restore a dial, because it was such an important piece. And I always wanted to buy it. It took me maybe 6-7 years to buy that piece. When I found it from the original owner. It was, water damaged the dial. So I asked someone to help me to basically clean the dial. And that's the only watch I personally ask someone to help me restore it. And of course, you know, I always talk about it because I never restored the watch. I always tell them, you see this watch, I restored it. You know, I'm proud of it because it is so beautiful, the piece, after restoration. So I personally don't do that, but I don't mind it. You know, so if someone did it and they offered me the watch, as long as I'm able to identify, and the watch speaks and has character, you know, I think is a buy. You know, so. We should start to accept non-waterproof, you know, pieces with a snapback like this, you know, that they might, you know, have some damages, or they will have over time. You know, it's impossible for a 78 years old watch to be brand new. You know, just I don't believe in the word new old stock unless it's new old stock. You know, which is rare. It's extremely rare. So I think I do believe in restoration when it's documented. And when it's declared. But I personally not ventured into that yet, only in that piece, you know, only in one piece. And I'm very happy with it. I'm very happy with it. I think with watches becoming so rare to find, to ask too much is also unfair. You know, we should accept the restoration, but we should also insist on declaring, you know, not saying, oh, this is a new watch. You know, or it's perfect condition. No, it's a perfect condition because you restored it, you know, and you should declare these kind of things. And it should be done by professionals, not by amateurs, you know, either Patek or maybe a couple of known artists, you know, that know how to do the Patek way, the traditional way. I think the only difference is waiting time because, you know, maybe wait 6 months, you know, because I waited maybe 6 months for that dial to be restored. Patek maybe 2 years to get back the watch. But I think in the vintage market, we really need to start accepting that. You know, we should not demand dealers to give us perfect watches because they will go and make them perfect. You know, and then this is, I think, the biggest problem. You know, we should not encourage the dealers or encourage the market to go and restore watches to make them look better for us. You know, we should actually decide ourselves as collectors. So for me, I prefer. At least on the business side of it, to just keep the watch always in its original condition, always, and let the client decide, you know. So you show it to the client loved the watch, you can give him an option to restore the piece, you know, and let the client decide. Maybe say, maybe in 2 years or 3 years I might restore it, you know. I didn't have a client that told me, let's restore it, because they love the pieces as they are. But I think we should try to promote it this way, you know. The client should decide to restore the piece, not us.
Yeah. That makes sense. So, out of in your collection, which watches? I know it's probably a tough decision to make, but I mean, what are the watches that give you the most joy to wear, not to have, but to wear?
I think Calatravas. You know, just there's no. I'm two things I really love a lot as a person. You know, pink on pink. You know, a pink case with the pink dial is. Every time I look, I'm happy. Okay, extremely happy on my wrist or on the, you know, or just seeing it. For collecting part, I like World Times, you know, so I just like to play with them all the time. You know, just look at them, you know, fix the time, you know, and fix the city. I think from joy of, you know, using it, I think World Time watches, pocket watches, etc. But for the wrist, I'm really a sucker for pink gold cases. You know, not the complications, you know, just simple as it is okay, you know, as long as you love the piece or you love the story. Because I think most people get attracted with watches based on either the journey or how they acquired the piece because there's a story behind it, or significance. You know, it might be a very simple watch as well, you know, extremely simple watch. There's a lot of pieces, it means a lot to me because of how I acquired them, the story, you know. Doesn't mean that they're most attractive pieces to look at, you know. They maybe not give me joy when I wear them on the wrist, but just the idea of remembering how I acquired them give me a lot of joy, you know.
I guess, I mean, same can be said about modern watches also. I mean, generally when you buy a watch, you do remember what made you walk into that shop, or, I mean, there's always a little something around it that makes it, why it's a different type of object. There's a lot of your personality in each.
But tastes change also, you know. Our tastes change all the time.
Course, yeah,
you know, there's a lot of references or watches that I really hated 5 years ago, but today they're my favorite. You know, we
do you have an example?
We evolve. You know, Yeah, I can say, for example, reference 3448, you know, Patek 3448 Padaloni as well. I just didn't like the reference, you know, because always, you know, the lugs are so small, you know, this reference is, you know, is very easy to polish. So when they polish, you know, I used to call the lugs toothpick, you know, right? But if you find the perfect condition example, you know, it's to die for. You know, but it's very, very difficult to acquire a perfect 3448. So I was turned off because I can't find the right one. You know, so it's like I parked that reference until I find the perfect example. I think this is one example of it. Sometimes it's the design of the watch. You know, it's maybe the lugs are too small, or you know, something off with the design that I don't like. You know, I think this is key.
Great. Well, Ali, it's been a pleasure having you here. Thank you for sharing your journey. I hope it inspired a few guys out there also, because I mean, it shows that everything's possible.
Everything's possible.
Just if you're committed and passionate, then indeed things can happen.
Fantastic.
And I'm really happy to hear that indeed you wanted to open your collection for others to enjoy, not only in the book, which is a very interesting book, but I think it's indeed this notion of sharing is absolutely crucial.
Yeah, we love to share, and you know, if you pass by Singapore, go to our showroom, Two Tone Vintage, you know, you will like it, because you know, we're really willing to share with you our journey. And also don't hesitate to check the watches with us. You know, we are actually a free advisor for so many people all day long, you know, and we get a lot of joy for doing that. You know, if you succeed, we succeed. You know, this is our way of work.
Well, very nice. Congratulations, and I wish you the best for the future.
It
was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. See you, and you guys, you know how we end these things. Viva watchmaking!
Viva.
Here we go.
Fantastic.
Great. Oh.